Just the thrill, the challenge that it gives your mind to go somewhere new and try to navigate and figure things out. It's there's an argument to be made for the simple life of just staying in one little city and being there, but yeah, once you have that bug, I don't know, it's tough to get rid of, especially in Canada. The winters, maybe we'll do half a year out of Canada or something like that. It's just once you realize that you don't need to be subject to cold, that's a really challenging one to stay around.
Yeah. Hi, and welcome to the Ronin Mindset podcast. My name is Steve Didier, and this is the podcast for you. If you want to stop living that NPC life, become the main character in your own story, live free, escape the matrix, travel the world, and be a digital nomad, expat, slow-mad, whatever you want to call it. If you're looking to make that change, this is where you're going to get the information and the education and the inspiration to do just that. And today, I think you're going to get a lot out of my guest because Joel Oliver is the founder and owner of East Coast Studio. It's a podcast production company. The company evolved from Joel's small beginnings as a freelancer over a decade ago. Joel underwent an open heart surgery in 2018 and then spent a number of years as a digital nomad. He has a very vested personal interest in healthy living, freedom, and self-improvement, which are subjects near and dear to my heart. Joel, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I'm excited to be here because I don't often get to talk about this type of thing. So when I saw you were looking for people, of that mindset, I got really excited to send you a message.
Yeah. We had our little pre-podcast chat, and I was like, "Yeah, this is gonna be good." So, where are you right now?
I'm in Bangkok, Thailand at the moment.
Oh, okay.
First time.
One of my favorite cities on earth, man. Absolutely love it. How long have you been there?
It's going on a month right now.
Okay. And you're working your podcast production business from there, correct?
Yeah, so it's distributed anyways. We have various team members in different parts of the world, mostly concentrated in North America. But my brother, who's my business partner, actually lives here as well. So the two of us are here.
Gotcha. Yeah, Bangkok is an amazing city. I remember the first time I was there, and it's just got that chaotic energy. I don't know how else to describe it, but there's something about it that just, man, it feels so alive. It's wonderful.
Yes, and I find, especially when you're in a place for the first time, anything can seem a little chaotic if you're just trying to get sorted out. So coming into a place like Bangkok is like even more than usual because it's just so much. You don't know what anything is. The English there's some English, of course, but yeah, it's a whole lot that hits you all at once. But if you've traveled enough, that becomes less and less as well. You just kind of, you take it one step at a time and I'm going to figure this out.
Exactly. So I in your bio, you mentioned that you had open heart surgery in 2018. Like, what happened with that? You're a young guy.
Yeah, it was actually genetic. So about a year before I had the surgery, my mom had the same thing. So hers happened much later in life, but it was something that they had been monitoring in me for probably 5 to 8 years. I'm not good with timelines, but I had a couple of issues earlier on and went in hospital, and they basically had a checkup every year just to make sure things were okay or see if they were progressing. And eventually, it was funny, I actually felt great the time that I went in and they said, you need surgery. I was feeling great, and I thought, this is going to be easy. There's not going to be an issue. We're good. And they said, no, actually, you need to get heart surgery. So to keep the story short, it's the condition was called mitral valve prolapse. So it's one of the heart valves. When your heart pumps, the valve is leaky and it's not doing an efficient job of pumping the blood. So the heart just kind of gets tired. It's not able to move blood as efficiently as it should, and that's not a good thing. So they have a number of ways to fix that. In my case, it was full open heart surgery. They replaced it with a titanium valve, which works great. You just need to be on blood thinning medication for the rest of your life. But the surgeon went with that option in that case because he thought, you're a young guy. I don't want to have to do this on you again if we try to repair or give you like a different kind of valve. So let's just get this done with. And that was his decision. Yeah, it's been okay since.
That's intense, man. That's intense because how old are you?
I'm 34 now, so I was 28 at the time.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm.
That's pretty crazy. And is that, were you kind of into healthy living prior to that, or was that kind of your stimulus to really look at being healthy?
I was fairly health minded as I just grew and matured and became, say, more awake, for lack of a better term. I just started learning more and seeing what was really in foods that I was eating and that sort of thing. So it was a journey. The heart surgery didn't have a huge impact on it, but still, since then, I have evolved even more in my knowledge and trying to eat even better. It was genetic, so it wasn't like my diet caused it or anything. But
Right.
also with the medication I'm on, I have to be much more mindful about the types of food that I eat because of the interactions. So not even just for health reasons, but if I eat too much spinach or something, I could die. So that's another reason to pay attention to your diet.
Who's spinach? Like, that's supposed to be powerful, Popeye style.
That's the
But
annoying part about it as a guy that's health conscious and I want to take supplements and that type of thing to, age gracefully. I can't take a lot of that stuff, but I got to be just thankful to be alive at this point. So I try to do that.
yeah, no doubt. Well, I'm sure you could find stuff that you can eat that's healthy that doesn't kind of complicate matters. So
Yeah.
that's very cool. Now, were you being a nomad before that? How did you get into the kind of the digital nomad lifestyle? What were you doing prior to that? Then how did that come about?
I was doing like live audio at a bar. So working for bands on the weekend, which is kind of a fun job because it was one thing I liked about this was they just paid me and left me alone. I just show up and do my job. I got to have some of my own independence of taking care of the equipment and that kind of thing. I like that. But obviously the hours start to weigh on you. And I'd been doing some voiceover work online at first, and that was amazing to get some money coming in from online. I just couldn't believe it. Like I'm just sitting in my house saying stuff and I'm getting money from it. So from there, I thought, what else could I do? Like, could I just work for myself all the time? And I had an audio engineering background. This was 2015 era, and podcasting was obviously a thing, but it was becoming more and more popular. So in just some research that I did, I noticed people are looking for help podcasting. Maybe I could do some work on those. So started getting into that more, and eventually that overtook the voiceover work to a point where I was definitely doing it full time, and I eventually had to get help. But that's the work side of it. I specifically wanted to give up the voiceover as well because you need a studio to do that. So it's not really conducive to traveling and being in new environments where you end up, there's a lizard running around your house or there's traffic in your Airbnb. Like you just don't really know what you're getting into. So I needed to go full-time audio work. I did that. Not really, like the plans just kind of all came together. I didn't set out trying to do it. But as I started, say, taking a couple of week trip and then a month, and then I realized, well, why am I going home? It's winter in Canada. Why am I home again? And what? And then I would travel more and more and realize, well, my house is empty half the year now. Well, okay, let's rent that out. And then let's just sell that and just be always traveling. So it just kind of came together like that over probably a period of a couple of years.
It's kind of cool. That's kind of like a natural progression. I've noticed I've talked to a lot of people who've gone from like the old whatever corporate lifestyle and then transitioned to a kind of a nomadic sort of lifestyle. And so many times it's like a single event, like a health scare, or even in my case, I had a really successful real estate business in Las Vegas. I got wiped out in the crash of '08. So then I had to kind of take stock and figure out who I was. And I was like, I wasn't even fulfilled with this anyway. It's just something I was doing with so much money. I'm like, I can't not do it. But then I'm like, well, I always wanted to travel and I could never do that because I had to be there. So I was like, okay, this is my opportunity. It's like a blessing in disguise, So then that was for me. It was like, okay, I'm going to sell my house, sell all my stuff, minimize everything, and then hit the road. So it's kind of neat for that just a gradual sort of progression into that lifestyle.
Something interesting that caught my ear there was you said you weren't even being fulfilled. I felt that way as well, but to compare two of our stories, I didn't really have that moment where I realized, hey, I'm not being fulfilled. What am I doing? It just had to come to me. I had to discover it, but I totally get that. And I would suggest that's a good thing for people to consider as well if they're wondering, could I do this nomadic lifestyle or could I benefit from a change? Because I was just going down that path of this is just what you do, I guess. I don't know. I'm going to get some job and just have my girlfriend here who's, we're okay. Everything's okay. But never waking up to go, hey, wait a minute, I could do a whole bunch more. What am I doing here? And I could have easily just had that life as well. But so, yeah, the fulfillment is a huge part of it.
Yeah, it's funny to me because, especially for a couple of years after I started, like I moved to Mexico, I was more of kind of a slow mad or
Same.
expat type situation, because I had a dog, big dog, like a 100-pound pit bull. So it was very difficult to travel. So I kind of based out of Playa del Carmen for a while. And I could go travel, and I had a great dog sitter for him there, so I could go travel. But I was kind of based there pretty much full time. And so many people would message me on social media and, man, I wish I could do what you do. That's my dream. I just want to travel and work and live abroad. I'm like, you can do it. You can. It's like it's a tough mindset switch, and you kind of got to work at it. But yeah, it's something you could do. But I think a lot of people just have that mindset, like you said, like this is what I have to do, and they do it.
Yeah, they don't even consider that it's an option. But especially these days, even if you're not an entrepreneur, let's say, there's so many more remote working opportunities. So it's just the internet and Airbnb and all these types of services. It's just been great for this. I think that's why we see so many more people do it now. But yes, like you, I will get lots of comments as well of people just saying, "What are you doing? Like, how come you're in a different place all the time?" Because I don't put everything out on social media, so it would just be stories or photos. And yeah, a lot of people were curious, how are you doing that?
It's fun to see people's reaction to that. And one of the things that I noticed last year, like last year I was fully nomadic. I was bouncing everywhere every 2 to 4 weeks. I would move, and I spent the majority of the year in Southeast Asia, Thailand and surrounding areas. And one of the common theme and different messages I was getting from people was, wow, it must be nice to be rich and you can just live that lifestyle while you're traveling. Well, I'm not broke, but I'm probably spending a lot less money living this lifestyle than you are sitting in Phoenix or Vegas or New York or Miami, because the cost of living has gotten out of control in the U.S.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I had that concern as well, especially with the company. I didn't want to put that image out that I'm traveling because, like you're saying, it could be misinterpreted. I'm not rich. But yes, if you're traveling in the right places or being budget conscious, say with Airbnbs, that sort of thing, you can do that on a budget. Like I'm spending less now than I was spending in Canada. Think about if you have a vehicle where you live, but then on the road, you don't have a vehicle anymore. So you don't have those types of payments. There's a lot of things that you don't have to pay for anymore. Thailand, so much cheaper. So it doesn't have anything to do with being rich. And you can do things too, like credit card points to cover your flights. There are so many ways to do this. I've been doing it for a long time. Not that I'm rich now, but I had much less money earlier on and I was still doing it. So yeah, that's not necessarily the case that you have to be rich just to bounce around.
Not at all. Not at all. And I'm glad you mentioned the points too, because I had used my credit cards a lot for my credit repair business.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pay for any flights. I was in 22 different airports last year.
Yeah.
And I paid for a couple flights, but mostly like when I went from Bangkok to Ho Chi Minh City, it was like $49 one way. I'm like, I'm not going to use points for that, But like I would get luxury flights on like Etihad Airlines or Qatar, and it's just all points.
Mm-hmm.
Too.
Yeah.
From the money that I was spending keeping my business running.
Exactly. And those are just everyday expenses. So, and that's, it's not like it's illegal or something. It's just normal. You get points. You're buying things anyway, and then you can cover a flight. So, yep, you don't need, there's no rich there at all.
No. And, like I don't know what you're paying for rent there. I didn't get anything spectacular, but for example, when I was in the Philippines, I was in the Makati district, the most affluent area of Manila, staying in a super, what do they call it, hyper amenitized luxury high-rise building on the 47th floor with some of the sickest views in the coolest little apartment. I paid like, I don't know, $600 for the month.
Right. Yeah.
And I was probably overpaying because I did it on Airbnb. I didn't kind of go through a local thing. So I probably could have got it cheaper, but I'm like $600 a month. And I'm like, this is amazing, gym and spa and like
Mm.
the views. It had a pool on the 36th and 37th floor, so it was like an infinity pool, and you had the views of the whole city. It was just absolutely amazing.
It's great. Yeah, there's a lot of variables, but let's just say, for example, just rough numbers that I'm paying essentially half here what I was paying in Canada where I was living, which is nowhere special. And this isn't either, but it's normal. And I was having this conversation with my brother actually about living in different places and here versus there, and some of the amenities that I'm kind of used to that may not be here, like not having hot water in the sinks in most places here was one thing I brought up. I said I kind of missed that. Like I grew
Yeah.
up having it there, and I don't know how to wash a dish without hot water. And he said, yeah, but for half the cost of rent, you could probably make do. And I said, yeah, the sidewalks are kind of bumpy, but yeah, it's it's a big difference in
Yeah.
savings. You're right. You got a point there.
It's a big difference. And I went back to the U.S. for a little bit, and I was living in downtown Phoenix. That was 2020 and 2021 because I was there for most of the pandemic. Nice apartment downtown, high rise. I think it was like 26th, 27th floor, 2 bedroom, but like 900 square feet, 90 square meters. And I was paying $3,000 a month. And then I'm in, Bangkok or Chiang Mai or the Philippines or wherever in Ho Chi Minh, and I'm getting these amazing apartments in these fantastic new buildings for a fraction of the price.
Yeah, it's great. And on that note too, let me try to bring up another point here so we can get as much knowledge out as possible. One thing that I do find is a downside here that I don't know if I'd be able to overcome permanently is, for us anyway, the way our business works, we need to be active when our clientele is, and that's North American time. So I've got to do essentially, like I wake up at 3 p.m. and go to bed at 7 a.m. So I see, especially this time of year, very little sunshine. And I think most humans, but definitely me as well, sun is important. It's important for your mood. It's important for everything. So I don't know that I could sustain that permanently. The thought of a Canadian winter again, though, is really sad and cold, but at least it has some sun. So that's one consideration here, that despite everything else, you need to consider that type of thing as well, depending on your work.
Yeah, the time zone is, if you are in Asia and your business is more like the North American continent, the time zone is correct. Because what time is it there right now?
It's almost 2 a.m.
Right. So I
Yeah.
remember doing podcasts just like you doing when I was in Bangkok and Thailand and Vietnam, and at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning because I had to accommodate the schedule of people in the US and Canada. So
Yeah.
that
It's very.
little bit of a drawback, yes.
Yeah, and it's just, this doesn't apply to everyone. Depends on your work schedule, like we're saying, but it is a bit strange too. Like I wake up at 3. So I'm not, personally, I like to just work a bit. I don't like to go out right away. So give it 2 or 3 hours by the time you do some work, maybe get a shower. Then it's 6 or 7 p.m. Well, if you wanted to do anything that required a daytime opening, like whatever it might be, yoga class or something. Well, a lot of yoga class, it's gone. Or you want to go to a store that's closed, that type of thing. So it's okay. There's ways around things, but just that normal type of life where you go out and it's all opposite. It's messed up. I eat supper at midnight. I don't know what I'm doing, but it's cool.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, that's one of the biggest reasons I stayed, like Mexico and the Americas for the most
Yeah.
part based out of, because when I had my credit repair business, I had to be on the phone and talking to clients, doing all that with clients in the US. So it's just much easier. So now I'm set up a little bit differently. I still have to do podcasts and things like that, but that's, you're not, 1 or 2 a week, So that doesn't impact me so much. I'm really looking forward to getting back to Asia. I really am.
Yeah, well, that's good. And you're right. That's a great option as well over, that the Americas, like the time zone thing, not really a problem then.
Yeah, yeah. But for a lot of people, it can definitely be an issue, and it was for me at that time too, a little bit. Not as much as for some, but
Yeah.
it was a little tough. So
And I mentioned too for me, like the inability to have some supplements and certain foods. I need all the help I can get for feeling good and staying motivated and getting to the gym. Not having sun as I age, not going to cut it. So that's a big consideration.
You may have to find a happy medium someplace, especially if you like warm weather, maybe somewhere over toward Europe. It's a little bit easier to navigate then.
Right. And you could pop vitamin D and maybe have like one of those happy lamps, but I don't know, just not really the same.
Not the same. Not the same. And I suppose with the heart condition, I suppose heavy doses of pre-workout are not on your menu either.
No, I'm lucky I can have some protein supplement.
You got to be careful. Because like we talked about, I usually just get up in the morning and get my workout in. That's when there's nothing. My phone isn't going off. Emails aren't going off. I can just focus on that, get it out of the way. But I'm not a morning person. So I jack up on pre-workout and stuff like that. Probably not the most healthy thing, but it gets it done.
Gets it done.
Yeah. So with the, how did you get into, I know you kind of explained how you got into podcasting, but did you start with podcasting or did you start right away with helping people with their podcasts?
I guess I started with audio editing, which could kind of entail anything. And then I saw that podcasting was happening. And so people were coming to me for help with that specifically, like how do I make this sound good or how do I put my episode together? But then they would say, by the way, do you know how all this stuff works? And it was a lot more of a Wild West back then. Like there's so many platforms now, there's so much information. But back then, no one really knew how to do anything, especially if you were just getting started. And so I just started learning things as people asked me questions. And the more knowledge I gained, the more work that came in and I knew the answers. And that's just how I went down that path. It just kind of drew me in there. It was like right place, right time as well. I feel kind of fortunate for that. It wasn't really a big plan. It was just there. And I had either the answers to what people wanted or I was able to figure it out.
Right. With the podcast, I know with the pandemic in 2020, there was a big boom in podcasting, wasn't there? Because people were sitting at home with nothing to do.
There was a very big yes. So for us, we were one of the industries that actually benefited from that. When unfortunately it was tough for some businesses, we had one of our best years at that point because everybody was starting a podcast.
I can imagine. How many people followed through with that?
I don't know an exact number, but to this day, when I talk to people and we do interviews and I talk about their podcast and I see that it launched around that period, March 2020 or a little after, I always bring it up or congratulate them to say, you did start it, but you kept going. As many of them did stop. And yeah, I worked in that industry, obviously, so I saw the drop off after a while of people who disappeared, but many still stayed on board, which is great. And there's still going to be a churn in anything, but podcasting too. There's plenty of people who start even now and stop. But during COVID, some people just wanted it to keep them occupied during COVID. They never had any long-term plans, so that's fine. But many kept going and it became a thing for them, like a tool for their business or whatever the case, whatever benefits they're enjoying from it.
I saw some stats. It wasn't too long ago, but basically the article went and said that, okay, just over 2 million podcasts, only 10% of those ever make it past or to 3 episodes. So now you're down to 200,000 and only 10% of those ever make it to episode number 21. Do you think that's basically accurate?
I haven't verified that data, but I've heard that in various forms over the years, and I believe it. And I saw another one even more recently that I did think was correct, and they were saying essentially on average it takes about 100 episodes or 2 years to see success. Now, they didn't firmly define what success was, but we'll take it for what it is. But they said 93% of podcasters don't make it that far. Which, again, that's going to happen in business. It's just people are going to stop for whatever reason. They get bored with it. They give up. Whatever the case, they weren't doing the right things. But on the flip side, I see that as, well, if you just take that on and say, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it for 2 years. I'm going to figure out how. I'm going to do this many episodes, and I'm going to be in that percentage of people who succeed. That sounds good. It's kind of, you've got to do the right things, but also if you could have that certainty with virtually anything, that if I just do this, I'm going to have some success in this amount of time. I would love that. I would love to know that a decision I make right now today could bring me whatever it is, doubling my revenue in a year or two from now. I would love to know that.
I think one of the biggest reasons, the modern society is such a microwave culture. People want results right now. They want that podcast to go viral. They want to be a big hit. They want to be famous. And this is not the way it works. Some people hit that, or some people have a certain degree of fame or notoriety or recognition or social media following, so they can kind of get a podcast off the ground quicker.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started, I didn't have a specific idea in mind to make money with it. But in my head, I'd read all the stats, I'd read this, read that, and I'm a believer in hard work and consistency, and like The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy is one of my favorite books. And so in my head, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do this and see where it takes me, and I'm gonna guarantee myself 200 episodes. If I haven't brought in a dime by 200 episodes, maybe I'll reevaluate.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, also on the flip side, maybe I won't reevaluate because I actually love doing this. So it's, but obviously if you're doing something, you're putting time and consistent effort and money and energy into it, you like to see a return.
Yes. Well, I commend you for choosing that number 200. Like, I'll do 200 and see what happens. Most people would not do that. They would say, well, I'll do 10 and see what happens. And the answer, what's going to happen in 10 episodes, is nothing. So they're going to give up because nothing happened. But yeah, you really need to put in that effort. And some things that you touched on there. First of all, this probably hurts my business because I'm not enough of a cheerleader, but I just feel like I'm too honest. I don't know what it is, but I don't want to ever go anywhere and just say till I'm blue in the face how amazing podcasting is. Everyone should do it. It's great. I'm just not that guy. Like, I can tell you what I've seen people do. I can tell you the reality. It takes hard work. I don't have any comment beyond that, really. So that's like, I just don't want to be one of those people that says that you got to do it. I'm the guy. Come work with me. Whatever. I'm not going to say that because it's not the case. It takes hard work. But you're talking about the numbers and going viral, that sort of thing. There are plenty of clients that I have, plenty of people I've seen that have not what we would consider huge audiences on social media, let's say, maybe a few thousand followers, maybe a few hundred. They are doing perfectly fine with their businesses. So we can get wrapped up in that by seeing stuff go viral or seeing massive YouTube channels and Instagram accounts and think, I have to go and get those kind of numbers to have a successful business. That's not the case whatsoever. So don't get too wrapped up in those specific kind of numbers, especially in like the type of businesses we'd be running. You're just not going to be appealing to a mass crowd. You don't need to. So don't even think that, right? So, and again, I'm not going to get on and say you have to do it. It's going to get you all these followers. Or even if you don't, you have a small audience, you're going to be rich. That's not like, I'm not saying that, but you don't need these giant numbers. Don't think that that's the end result or the end goal for doing a podcast or anything online.
No, you don't need Joe Rogan numbers.
No.
You're not going to get that. Well, maybe you do. Who cares? I mean, maybe you will. I'm not going to say anybody won't, but the thing I've noticed as I've gone and I started learning, I started becoming a student of the podcasting game. And my whole goal is just to get 1% better every episode in my interview style and, maybe my lighting or maybe my editing, whatever it is. I just want to keep improving little bit by little bit, like the concept of Kaizen, the 1% improvement. And eventually, over time, you keep putting the reps in, you're going to get good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
Nobody starts out good. Nobody starts out good.
No, even if you plan and you try and you think you have perfected it, you're not. You didn't. And yeah, that 1% every time, like, that's so important. It really is. And I've been doing this with people for so many years, but once I only started my own podcast this year, and I have a pretty good handle on technical things and talking and all that. But yeah, I look back at even my first stuff now and it's embarrassing because it's just, there's just things you have to learn by doing it. So this whole analysis paralysis, I can't do it yet, it's not perfect. Just start. You want to have a minimum level of quality to some degree. You don't really want to embarrass yourself if you're a high-profile doctor or something. But thinking that you're going to perfect it before you go, no, just start doing it. No one's going to really be listening in the beginning. If you don't have a big following, Just start doing it. It's so important, and you will perfect it over time. It's the only way to do it.
Yeah. You've got to get in the reps, and I've noticed that. Like, I've always been really good at talking to people. I was in sales forever. I bartended. So talking to people, having conversations was so in my head I was like, oh, piece of cake. But I didn't have any direction. That was my main thing. And I started listening to some of my older ones. I'm like, I am just wandering all over the place with cool conversations, but there was no direction to them. And when my business mind kicked in, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and monetize this. I took some time off to kind of reimagine it, like 6 months. And I niched down more on the digital nomad type audience and the people who are looking to get out of the U.S., out of Canada, out of Europe. And I've got a good business model behind it in terms of making money now. But, I noticed there were some people, I got a friend of mine, does not have a big audience, but he has monetized it in terms of what he sells in terms of coaching and things like that. And he's making big money. And it's all directly from his podcast. And if you look at his podcast numbers on YouTube or wherever, he doesn't have a huge audience. He just got his YouTube channel monetized, like literally a couple months ago. But he's making 10, 15 grand a month directly from his podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And see that YouTube monetization or running ads, that sort of stuff, that's typically not the way that most people should, in our type of business anyway, should try to monetize, because you're only going to get lower amounts especially when we're talking these lower view counts, you're not going to get a ton of money for running ads. You're going to get it by selling a high ticket offer to some of the people in your audience. So you're absolutely on the right track there by niching down. Because yes, you need to have it in mind. Who am I trying to reach? What is my business? Who do I want to talk to? How do I make content for those people? To use the Joe Rogan example again, the whole I'm just going to get on and talk to people about whatever. You can't do that. It's just not going to do anything. Okay, maybe these big influencers or whatever, they can do it. But if you don't have a niche, why would anyone listen to your show? Or for example, you're looking for guests for your show. You had a clear picture of here's who I want to have on my show, and you know who you're serving. If you just posted and said, I just like talking to people who are interesting, I wouldn't have responded to it. And it's useless. It's nothing. So you have to have that niche.
You have to. And that was one of the biggest thing. I was having a lot of fun doing the podcast, but I just noticed that I really don't have a direction. I had some very cool conversations with some very inspirational and very successful people who had overcome amazing challenges and odds, but I had no direction. So I was like, okay, yeah, I gotta kind of niche down a little bit, figure out exactly who I'm talking to, how in the back of my mind, also how I plan to monetize it, the steps and the bigger picture, the product, services, etc. And then I can find guests whose the conversations are going to speak to the audience that I want to reach.
Yes. Now, I want to add one important thing in here. There are many benefits to podcasting, and one of them is, like you said, you had really interesting conversations. You probably made some friends, made some great connections. That's okay. If that's what you want to do with podcasting and it's fun and you have no plans to ever turn it into a business, no problem. The thing is, if you want to be strategic and most people want to grow an audience to some extent, or they want to grow a business around it, then you need to start thinking about, okay, I need to get a little more serious here about choosing a niche and who I'm talking to. I need to be intentional about that. But if you don't really have any goals, have the conversations. That's fine. But realize if you want to be serious about it, you've got to think about it differently.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what you just described is kind of the thought process I went through, and it's like, okay, I gotta tweak this a little bit. So what is your podcast? The one that you started? You said about a year ago?
Yeah, ours is called Profits Through Podcasting. So we actually talk to podcasters who are entrepreneurs as well and learn how have you been monetizing your podcast? Like, how did you build your business, that sort of thing, and mostly in the health and wellness space specifically.
Okay. So you niche down even within the podcasting space, you niche down to like health and wellness type podcasters.
Yeah, because before that, and this was just my mistake, not really having a business background, we were just we'll do anything for anyone, and then you're just in a sea of everyone else. Like we have nothing different about us than any other podcast company. So this gave us some advantages, and I'm passionate about that niche, so it just made a lot of sense once it was pointed out to me we should go down this road. So that's how we ended up there. And it's been very interesting. And I love being part of creating that content where I'm passionate about it. I see what the clients are doing for people, like helping them live healthier lives. It's really neat, So yeah, again, the niche, it's great.
Yeah. No, that seems like a really good niche for you because obviously you've got the passion for the healthy lifestyle and things like that. So that really fits. I thought about that too because my tagline years ago on social media was fitness, travel, freedom. Those are like the three things that I, really got my juices flowing. And I was trying to think of some way to kind of get the fitness aspect of it into the podcast, but I decided I was just going to have the YouTube channel and I do lifestyle stuff. I'll kind of get some fitness stuff in there and I won't do anything in the podcast specifically. I won't focus right on travelers. Now, if I get travelers and digital nomads on who are into fitness, well, then we can have that conversation too.
Right. And I mean, you can see how this stuff, there's a lot of synergy when you go down a niche. Like by me working with health and wellness people, I have all kinds of connections, people who could help each other. Same for you, right? You're talking, let's just use an example like a travel insurance for Nomad's company or a travel SIM card. You start meeting people who can help each other rather than just random connections. There's so many benefits.
Yeah. Another thing that really struck me that I didn't anticipate about the podcasting, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but it's the people that you meet that you bring on as guests. The network that you build is just fantastic.
Yeah, you could build your whole business that way or start doing business with people. You meet someone that's going to be able to help you. They might help you back. They'll have a referral. It's so powerful. Now I am talking about how great podcasting is, but I do believe it. I mean, these are facts.
It is a fantastic medium, and I absolutely love it. Like I said, I'm doing this. I'm not, it's not a main income source for me right now, but I have the plans in place to build it. But also patience, like you talked about. I'm pushing close to 40 episodes now, which is cool, but it's a long way from 200, which is my niche or my original goal. But when I did some research when I was niching down, I kind of researched like the top podcasts in the travel space, specifically digital nomads and things like that. And just about every one of them that were listed in the top 20 were at right about 200 episodes. Some of them a little bit more, but 200 seemed to be the common line. So that further reinforced my original thought when I started. It was like, okay, that seems to be the magic number, like 200, and then reevaluate.
Great. Yeah. Well, don't give up on that. Keep doing it.
I love it. I'm not giving up. This is my thing. So, what's next after? You don't really have any plans in place, but do you have any idea what's next after Bangkok?
Probably back to Canada. Maybe try to miss most of the winter, but I've got ties back there, family and things like that. So I probably will get back there sooner rather than later, but we'll see. I didn't buy a return ticket when I came here just to keep my options open, but that's what I foresee. I was kind of starting to settle down. I had my years of nomad and slow mad life, but it's kind of getting to that point whereas maybe time for family or something, and bought some rental properties, things like that. This trip was a little unexpected, but I just thought I'll come see my brother, and I don't know. I think my life is probably getting a little less exciting in the coming year. That's what's next. Is the most exciting part, I think, is past. But it was great, and it gives you that contrast for the more relaxing life too.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. And living a nomad life permanently, I don't know if that's realistic for some people, I suppose, but I think most people, after a little while, the kind of urge to put roots down someplace is probably going to happen.
Yeah, and it might be roots, but with some traveling still. I love traveling. I think it's a great benefit. So yeah, maybe more of a permanent base, but still some lengthy trips here and there. That's what I would envision.
Yeah, once you have that travel bug, you're never going to give it up.
No, and it's just it's just the thrill, the challenge that it gives your mind to go somewhere new and try to navigate and figure things out. There's an argument to be made for the simple life of just staying in one little city and being there, but yeah, once you have that bug, I don't know, it's tough to get rid of. especially in Canada. The
is.
winters, maybe we'll do half a year out of Canada or something like that. 'Cause it's just, once you realize that you don't need to be subject to cold, that's a really challenging one to stay around.
Yeah, really. I grew up in Minnesota, so I know exactly. I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. I just can't. I don't mind visiting someplace cold, like going to home for the holidays or a ski trip or something along that line. But get out. I cannot live someplace cold. I
It's
cannot.
yeah, it's like it's trying to kill you. There's some people
Yeah.
prefer cold, some people prefer warm. I'm a warm guy. The cold it's just literally trying to take your life. Whereas yes,
Yeah.
heat can do that as well, but the cold is just bad.
It's bad. I was trying to explain that to my girlfriend because it's kind of cold here in Monterey and right now, which is fueling my fire to get back on the road really, really bad. But yeah, I think it was getting close to freezing, 3 to 10 degrees Celsius, which would be in the 40 or so Fahrenheit. But and she's like, "Oh, it's cold." I'm like, "I hate it." But then I showed her the weather of where my parents live, and she's like, "That can't be right." I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's right. It's a high of -12
Yeah,
Celsius. That's a high."
yeah.
Like, no way. Yeah, no, it's unbearable. I can't do
I
it.
know. Looking back home and seeing there's been days already where it's say -20 or something. Like there's like a 50-degree gap between where I am and where home is. That's not good.
No, no, it's not. So, with kind of going back to the podcast thing for a second, if for somebody who's looking to kind of get out and get into some sort of traveling lifestyle, full nomading or slow madding or just want to expatriate or something along those lines, how would you advise them? Obviously, we talked about podcasting. It's a slow burn and it's not for everybody, but if they want to use podcasting as a tool to help facilitate that, what advice would you have for somebody?
Yeah, well, first is the niche. So understand who you want to even reach. Think about your business, who you're trying to talk to here, and then create content on the podcast for those people. We kind of alluded to as well, there are different methods of monetizing the podcast through the content. Like it may be the audience that hears you, but maybe also the guests that you have on. You might strategically get guests on your show because you want to meet them and maybe they could become clients of yours. So that's an important consideration. The thing that I talk about the most and the thing I like, this is how it should be done in most cases, is building a business around it. Thinking that you're going to have a podcast with a big enough audience where you get sponsors and make money, like to generate a living through sponsorship, typically not the most ideal way to go because it does require fairly big audience. Now, it can be done. It can supplement business income, but the thing that I'm well versed in is having your own business. So creating the content for those people who are your ideal clients. And by the way, you need to know who those people are. If you don't know who your ideal clients are in your business, you can't even do marketing. And if you're doing it, it's a waste of time. So everything needs to go through that. Yeah, everything needs to go through that lens of who are my ideal clients. But as I mentioned, podcasting, if you are consistent with it, you do a good job, it can pay off. It's not necessarily for everyone, but you want to consider who you're talking to, do a good job of it, be consistent, and you do need to give it at least a couple of years of consistent podcasting, do it strategically. You don't even have to have guests on. You might do all solo content. You don't have to be doing interviews, but think about your strategy. Who are you trying to connect with? What are you trying to sell? And that would help you determine if you should even do it, I guess, is a good thing to think about as well. Let's not just say it's for everyone, but think about your goals, what you're trying to achieve with it. The budget, can you afford, say, the time and or production costs to keep it going for that long? And are you committed to hanging in there? Because if you're not going to do it for, let's call it 100 episodes, but you're going to go with 200. If you're not committed to doing that many, it's hardly worth even starting. So
Yeah.
I think that covers how to go about it and what to think about before you even make that leap.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I know a lot of people who utilize a podcast as a marketing supplement to their existing business, and that seems to be really, really effective. with me, I kind of went the opposite way. I'm doing a podcast and then I'm building a business around that. And I'm not in any rush. Unfortunately, I don't need to have this business built up to sustain me. But I picked up a few clients here and there from the podcast, like more of the kind of global lifestyle design coaching sort of thing.
Great.
And that's just to help people who are like, okay, man, we want to get out of the US or Canada or wherever. Where do we start? Like, okay, let's work it down to, what countries, start with the weather, start with all these different things. And then we can look at some specific countries and the pros and cons and cities and, different things like that. But I've got a whole suite of products to market along with that, specifically putting together one on different tax structures and different things that you can do to mitigate your tax burden, especially if you're living a nomadic lifestyle, because there's so much you can do 100% legally, and it basically can almost eliminate your tax bill. So, why wouldn't you? We spend what? I don't know what it is in Canada, but it's probably maybe even worse than the US, but on average, the average American spends 8 months of the year working to pay taxes in one form or another, whether it's income tax, sales tax, property tax, whatever. 8 months out of the year, your income is going to the government.
Yeah, it's terrible. So
it's ridiculous.
That's a whole thing in itself. I'll just start punching the wall if I had to talk about taxes here and how much money goes to taxes. But you raise a great point there, because you're talking to people through all of this, and you're able to do market research essentially and start understanding what do the people out there, like, what questions do they have? What product could I create to help these people? So you're getting some great insight there as well through the podcast. And like you mentioned, you don't have a business yet. You're doing the podcast first and developing a business in addition to it. Other people would have a business and maybe add a podcast in. So yeah, it's hard to even say that there's one specific way to do it. Everyone's situation is going to be different. And maybe podcasting doesn't work in some situations, or there's some other strategy that's better. But I think we did a good job of laying out the benefits of it and how it looks to actually create one, and people could make the decision if they feel it would be a good route for them to go down or not.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of pros, but like we discussed, there's pros and cons, and it might be a fit, might not. But I think it's just an absolutely wonderful medium, because you get to have long form conversation, not just the snippets.
Right.
You can actually get into it. So, well, what advice would you have for somebody who's looking to make that break? Not necessarily in the podcasting arena, but just, hey, they're looking to get out of that 9-to-5 stuff, and they want to become more of a nomadic type lifestyle, and they're considering that. What advice would you have somebody, especially when it comes to like mindset?
I think something we touched on really early was just becoming aware that you could potentially do it. Like, you're sitting in your office here, maybe for some reason you heard this podcast. You would even have to be aware just to search this podcast out. But for whatever reason, let's say the thought popped in your mind, an ad popped up, and you thought, wait, maybe I would like to do that. And then you start exploring the options. How could I make this happen? Could I just get a remote job? Could I start a business of my own? What does it take, or what's the next step? So that's what I would say, is just start thinking about it. Think about how you could take a step to make it work. How do I lower my expenses? Could I get rid of my car? Am I living in a really expensive apartment right now? Could I downsize? Or if I got rid of that, then I can travel. Just having that option in your mind that you're even able to do it is a huge first step to do. Anyone, I think it's possible for anyone, but we just had to first become aware that, yep, you can do it. It's possible.
Yep. No, I think that's spot on, Joel, just because a lot of people say they want to. So you have to figure out if you really want to, or if it's just something that's fun to say, first of all. But if you look at it, you really do some self-examination, get clear on your values, and you say, this is something I really want to do. I'm not satisfied with my life. That's the next thing. It's like, yes, it's possible. You have to go over that click. It's not just something that exists out there that is possible for them, not me. It is 100% possible. It's never not easy, but if you want something bad enough, you'll figure out a way.
Yeah, I think you brought up something really good there that I probably should have added as a disclaimer as well. It may sound exciting and you'll hear these stories. I just sold everything and went to Thailand and it was great. Well, I'm a little more cautious, so I think that's probably why my journey evolved as it did, more slowly. Maybe it'll work out fun if you just drop everything you have and fly away for a year, but you also might want to test it out. See if you could go on a trip for a while, or don't end up somewhere that you hate and you're not. One of my friends did this. He asked me for advice on where I was going, and I told him, and he said, "Nah, don't go there. I'm going to." I won't say where it was, but he got there and he said, "Man, this is not good. I got to get out of here." And he planned everything around it, and even added in how dumb I was for not going where he was. And so, yeah, it might be good to test the waters a bit, or maybe not. But yeah, we'll at least put the disclaimer there. Now it's not our fault.
Well, everybody's got a different way of approaching things. For me, it was like, okay, I made the decision, sold my stuff, sold my house, packed up my car, my dog, and we drove. We drove all down through Mexico to Playa del Carmen. And just set up shop. I didn't know anybody there. I was just like, okay, this seems like a cool place. I can drive there, so let's go. But then, a lot of other people kind of do like you did. They're like, okay, I traveled for a little bit. Okay, maybe got a remote job and I worked it from here for a little while, and that wasn't so bad. So I'm gonna do a longer trip, or the kind of more incremental type steps. There is no right way of going about it, but
yeah,
if you want to, you got to start moving in that direction. And that's the thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And your work situation will play into it as well. The type of person that you are. If you are good under pressure, what if you have a work emergency and the airport Wi-Fi is slow, or you can't find something? There's all these things that just come up, and I think they help build your character. But depending on your situation is going to affect if you can just run off and not have a plan really, or if you really need to be strategic, like, hey, I need to have a really important meeting that day with a client. Am I going to cancel it, or can I book my flights around it? What airport am I? There's just so many things to consider. And yeah, if you start the slow way, that's what worked for me. But it's good to just understand all those things. And by doing this, by traveling, that's where you get the experience, and it sets you up for just being more equipped to handle life as well.
Yeah, it makes you become adaptable, whether you want to be or not. You have to. Very cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Where can people reach you? If somebody's looking to start a podcast, or they have a podcast and they need some help, reach out to Joel. Where can they find you?
eastcoaststudio.com is the best. Just head over there. All my social media is there. I'm always happy to chat. Doesn't have to be about podcasting, but yeah, hopefully some of this was useful today.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was some really good information. So I'll put all your contact information in the show notes and everything. So if you've got a podcast and need some help with that, reach out to Joel. Appreciate you coming on, brother. Really had a good time.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I love what you're doing. So thanks for the opportunity.